on Arirang News. South Korea, the U.S., and Japan have all announced independent sanctions against individuals and entities that help facilitate North Korea's development of weapons of mass destruction. South Korea files an annulment of an international tribunal's order for the government to compensate American private equity firm Lone Star Funds with more than $200 million in relation to the company's sell-off of the now-defunct Korea Exchange Bank. The final regular session of the 21st National Assembly kicks off this afternoon with many bills on the table, including next year's budget proposal, while the annual parliamentary inspection of the government will also take place.
Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin with independent sanctions newly imposed on Pyongyang by Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo practically on the same day. They separately sanctioned individuals and entities that facilitate North Korea's illegal weapons development program. This comes about a week after the regime had attempted its second spy satellite launch. Our foreign affairs correspondent, Bae Eun-ji, leads us off.
In response to North Korea's provocation, South Korea has imposed a new round of sanctions on the regime. The Foreign Ministry announced Friday that the sanctions target 5 individuals and a company involved in the North's nuclear missile development and funding. This includes a North Korean firm called Ryugyong Program Development, which reportedly plays a key role in Pyongyang's development of unmanned weapon systems. The company's chief, Ryu Kyung-chul, and 4 other company officials, Kim Hak-chul, Chang Won-chul, Lee Chul-min, and Kim Ju-won, have been put on the list. The Foreign Ministry explained that South Korea is the first in the world to impose sanctions on this particular company and those related to it. This is the 11th round of sanctions put in place against the North since President Yoon Suk-yeol took office in May last year, and they're now among a total of 54 individuals and 51 institutions that have been sanctioned so far. The Japanese government also said Friday that it has imposed sanctions on 3 groups and 4 individuals involved in North Korea's nuclear missile development, saying they would continue to seek North Korea's denuclearization and closely cooperate with Seoul and Washington. In coordination with South Korea and Japan, the United States also newly sanctioned 2 individuals and 1 entity who have directly supported or helped generate revenue for North Korean organizations linked to the development of weapons of mass destruction. The action targets 2 Russia-based individuals, Chun Jin-young and Mikhailo V. Kozlov, as well as a company, Intellect LLC, that's owned or controlled by Kozlov and connected with a Moscow-based construction project coordinated by Chun. The sanctions come a day after Pyongyang launched 2 ballistic missiles in what it called a tactical nuclear strike drill, and about a week after the regime failed its second attempt to put a spy satellite into space. The coordinated action from the 3 countries also comes after their leaders agreed to improve their joint response capabilities to North Korea's threats during their historic summit at Camp David. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's military has ended a search and salvage operation for the sunken wreckage of a North Korean space rocket without discovering anything meaningful. An official from the Joint Chiefs of Staff said on Friday that aircraft and naval vessels had been deployed in waters west of the Korean peninsula after Pyongyang attempted to launch what it claimed was a military spy satellite late last month. However, the military concluded the operation on Thursday, saying no meaningful debris was likely to be found. It's widely expected that a self-destruct system installed on the rocket may have caused the body to break up into small pieces. A joint military command for drone operations was launched in South Korea on Friday to counter military threats from North Korea. The Drone Operations Command is the country's first joint combat command involving all of its armed forces and aims to utilize the unmanned aerial vehicles to carry out defensive and offensive operations. During the ceremony marking its establishment, President Yoon Suk-yeol was quoted as having expressed his hopes that the unit will instill fear in the enemy. Drones have become increasingly utilized in warfare, with UAVs and sea drones being used in the war in Ukraine and North Korea unveiling surveillance and attack drones in July. Defense Minister Lee Jong-seop sat down with his Polish counterpart Mariusz Błaszczak to address related collaboration. The talks took place on Thursday as part of Minister Lee's four-day agenda in Poland. According to ministry officials here in Seoul, the two defense leaders sought to strengthen their security partnership and arms cooperation. Minister Yi was also briefed on preparations for the International Defense Industry Exhibition that is set to open next week in the Polish city of Kielce, with South Korean companies also poised to take part. The Polish minister, for his part, shared plans of a Polish military drill in the near future, using the country's recently purchased South Korean defense equipment, including K-2 tanks and K-9 howitzers. The South Korean government today filed an appeal against an international court's order to pay millions of dollars in damages to the U.S. firm Lone Star, citing a violation of procedures, among other issues. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
The South Korean government has filed an appeal to cancel an international tribunal's order to pay American private equity firm Lone Star Funds compensation over its sell-off of a local bank. On Friday, the Ministry of Justice announced that it had filed its appeal to the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes on the grounds of the ruling overstepping the tribunal's authority, it being a violation of related procedures, and that it had a lack of justification. The ministry argued that the verdict had been made without specifying details of the illegal acts of the South Korean financial authorities, as demanded by international law when acknowledging state responsibility in disputes. It also argued that during the process of selecting evidence submitted by the International Chamber of Commerce, a third party with no involvement in the case, the government had been stripped of the right to question and cross-examine the evidence. The appeal comes with 5 days left to spare until the ICSID's appeals deadline, following its ruling in August last year when it ordered Seoul to pay $216.5 million plus interest to Lone Star in compensation. Back in 2012, the firm brought an investor-state dispute settlement claim of $4.68 billion against the South Korean government, arguing Seoul's financial regulatory authorities had intentionally delayed approval of its plan to sell a controlling stake in the now-defunct Korea Exchange Bank to HSBC. It eventually ended up selling it to Seoul-based Hana Financial Group for a lower price, prompting the firm to file the claim. The ministry argued that the delay had only come about as a result of Lone Star's manipulation of stock prices, and that there had been no evidence submitted to suggest that Lone Star had reasonable expectations to make a profit with the sale of KEB. With the compensation ordered by the ICSID lowered down to $216.01 million in May, Lone Star sought to cancel the order in July as it deemed the payment too small. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
The final regular session of the 21st National Assembly began this Friday afternoon and will end on December 9th. The session will include the annual parliamentary inspection and interpellation, as well as a review of next year's budget proposal. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hu explains.
The last regular session of the 21st National Assembly, and also the last of its kind before April's general election, kicked off on Friday.
For the next 100 days, we will review and vote on many bills, including next year's budget, as well as conduct the parliamentary inspection of the government. I ask you lawmakers to prepare for this regular session so we can successfully complete the 21st National Assembly.
Coming right up, beginning next Tuesday, are 3 days of government Q&A sessions. Every day, 12 different lawmakers will question government officials on topics such as politics, diplomacy, security, economy, education, and society. With about 7 months remaining until the general election next year, it's also the parliament's goal to complete electoral reform by the end of October.
We must complete all electoral reforms within that month. That way, we can ensure people's political rights and offer a fair chance at competition for new politicians.
Also in October, from the 10th to the 27th, the annual parliamentary inspection of the government will take place. Each parliamentary committee will conduct inspections on their respective fields of expertise. There will be around 7 plenary sessions until December, with the possibility of more if deemed necessary. This will be the Assembly's last chance to discuss and vote on some of the pending bills. The PPP is pushing for reforms in education, labor, and pension, while the opposition Democratic Party places priority on countermeasures amid Japan's release of radioactive wastewater. The continued clash between the ruling and opposition parties is expected as the rival parties discuss a budget proposal submitted by the government.
The ruling party is stressing that the budget proposal is appropriate for achieving financial soundness, but the opposition is calling for a modification, saying that the plan cuts investments for the future and projects for public welfare. 이시후, Arirang News.
Despite a drop in overall exports, South Korea logs a trade surplus for the third consecutive month in August, backed by strong outbound auto shipments and a greater fall in imports led by a fall in energy prices. Our An Sung-jin has more.
South Korea's trade balance saw surplus for the third consecutive month in August. Data released by the Ministry of Trade on Friday show that the country's trade balance last month was $870 million, with imports at just over $51 billion and exports at $51.9 billion. Imports fell by more than 22% on year as oil, gas, and energy imports dropped by more than 40%. The country's exports saw a decrease of 8.4% to $51.9 billion compared to the previous year due to a high base effect from high exports last August. A drop in the export prices for semiconductor and petroleum products was also attributed to the drop. However, the decreasing export rate narrowed to a single-digit figure compared to the 16.4% on-year drop seen in July, as auto exports have increased for 14 straight months. By category, shipments of automotive parts, displays, and household electronic products all rose, while exports of semiconductors and petroleum and steel products all dropped. Compared to the previous month, however, semiconductor exports rose by 15%, reaching $8.6 billion, showing signs of a gradual recovery. Outbound shipments to the United States and Europe jumped to record highs for any August as exports for automobiles and mechanical products sharply increased. Although exports to China and the ASEAN region declined following a drop in semiconductor prices, exports to Vietnam were back in the black, with increased demand for displays.
In early September, we plan to prepare additional support measures to revitalize exports, focusing on diversifying export products and regions and resolving difficulties for export companies.
The ministry reaffirmed its efforts to maintain the surplus. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho stated that the first half of this year was difficult as there were no visible results in terms of export growth. He added that although it has been tough, the country is moving toward a relatively stable phase of economic recovery as the semiconductor sector is expected to improve. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Staying with exports, those of Korea's instant noodles hit a record high during the first 7 months of this year. According to the Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation and the Korea Customs Service on this Friday, the value of ramen exports from January to July posted $522 million, up almost 18% on year. Officials point out it's also the first time the value has surged past the $500 million mark during that period. The latest finding is being linked to the popularity of K-culture. The government will hire 100 foreign nannies or housekeepers to work for selected families within the Seoul region as early as December as part of a 6-month pilot project. Priority for the project will be given to single parents, families with multiple children, and couples in their 20s to 40s with both people working. Potential nanny or home help candidates have to be over 24 years old with work experience in the field and no criminal record, among other criteria. Those chosen will be paid at least Korea's minimum hourly wage. That's less the current going rate for domestic nannies or housekeepers, which is around 15,000 won or $11 per hour. Beyond borders, more than 70 people have been killed in a tragic blaze that broke out inside a rundown residential building in Johannesburg, South Africa, early Thursday. Our ICSID has the latest.
A 5-story building in central Johannesburg that was being used as informal housing caught fire Thursday, leading to the death of at least 74 people. According to local authorities, 12 of the dead are children. More than 50 others were injured in the massive blaze, as the fire is believed to have started at around 1:30 a.m. local time, when most of the residents were asleep. Responding to the news of the deadly fire, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa called it a great tragedy and said an investigation would help prevent a repeat of the incident.
This incident calls on all of us, from the emergency services and other entities of government, to reach out to survivors, to help restore people's physical, psychological well-being, and to offer all material help and assistance to the residents affected by this. And I do hope that the investigations into the fire will enable communities and authorities to prevent a repeat of such a tragedy.
The South African leader said in a press conference that the building used to be home to abused women and children before being taken over by cartels and becoming one of the many so-called hijacked buildings in the city of Johannesburg. Ramaphosa explained those living in the facility were often forced to pay rent to gangs. Many other properties near where the blaze occurred also have houses deemed unfit to live in, as they lack running water, toilets, or a legal electricity connection. South Africa has suffered a housing shortage for many years, with an estimated 15,000 people estimated to be homeless in the city of Johannesburg alone. 이승재, Arirang News.
Here in Seoul, fascinating layers of light to replicate the natural phenomenon of auroras light up the night sky. Our Choi Soo-young invites us to the Light Festival to be enjoyed on a cool autumn night.
The autumn evening sky in Seoul is filled with the layers of lights. The Seoul Light DDP 2023 Autumn Festival kicked off on Thursday night at Dongdaemun Design Plaza and will run until September 10th. The event has been held since 2019, but only during the winter, and this year is the first time it will be held both in autumn and winter.
The main theme of this year's event is digital nature, brought to life through human technology in urban spaces.
The highlights of this event are the works of the world-renowned digital art master Miguel Chevalier, as well as the artist and environmental activist Dan Asher. Chevalier is seen as a pioneer of digital art, seeking the harmonious coexistence between nature and artificial elements by using the architecture, history, and seasons of specific locations. At this year's event, he used AI to bring his artwork to the wall of Design Plaza.
I have visited Korea many times and have vividly experienced its different seasons. The sensations of the wind and colors, and these elements became a major source of inspiration for me.
Awaiting visitors on the DDP Grass Hill is another remarkable work of art. Swiss-born artist and activist Dan Asher has used layers of lights to replicate the natural phenomenon of auroras. Having showcased it in 38 countries, including Paris and London, he shared mesmerizing urban auroras and expressed how he felt honored to perform in Seoul.
The idea is to recreate this natural phenomenon, but also potentially the feeling that people can have when they see the real northern lights, this feeling of awe, this expansion that appears.
Both artists said sharing their artwork in public and open spaces is the key to enjoyment, breaking free from standardized spaces like art galleries.
I think it's an amazing show. I haven't seen anything like this before. I think it's picturesque, and I'm fond of this building.
That I cannot stop looking at it, And at the same time, I'm continuously taking photographs with my mobile phone because every angle that I look at it is so different.
These public artworks can be enjoyed daily and free of charge from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. at Dongdaemun Design Plaza. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
On Thursday night here in Korea, many say goodbye to August and hello to September in a special manner, that is, by making a wish upon a super blue moon. Our Song Yu-jin covers this rare phenomenon.
Brighter than a regular full moon, the super blue moon rose for the first time in 5 years on Thursday, shortly after sunset. What exactly is a super blue moon?
Supermoon is a full moon at the closest distance from the Earth, so it is larger and brighter than a standard full moon. Blue moon is the second full moon on the one calendar month.
According to NASA, a supermoon is about 14% larger and 30% brighter than a micromoon, a full moon at the farthest point in its orbit around the Earth. And it's worth noting that a blue moon is not actually blue. As Dr. Cho said, it signifies a second full moon within a single calendar month. A full moon generally occurs once a month, but because a moon cycle is 29.5 days, a full moon falls twice within the same month every 2 or 3 years. Around 25% of all full moons are supermoons, and only 3% are blue moons. So a super blue moon, which has both of these uncommon traits, is more exceptional.
So it's almost 9 on a weekday morning, but as you can see, hundreds of people have gathered here at the Gwacheon National Science Museum, south of Seoul, to see the rise of the super blue moon. Now that's because if you lose this chance, you'll have to wait almost 14 years.
All you had to do was look up into the sky. Adding to the view was the appearance of the planet Saturn to the upper right of the moon. That's because Saturn was in its closest position to the Earth a few days ago. These celestial displays illuminated not just the sky, but also sparked excitement among visitors.
And it was really cool because no one knew where the moon was until it started coming up over the mountain. And then seeing it through the telescope was amazing. You could see all the craters, and the cloud was covering the moon. It was really cool.
I wish for my family's well-being while looking at the moon. I hope my kids are always healthy.
I hope I no longer fight with my sister.
The next super blue moon is set to come in January 2037. Song Yu-jin, Arirang News.
Unseasonable heat will prevail for inland regions tomorrow. Highs in Seoul will be hovering around 31 degrees Celsius. On Sunday, the entire nation will be under rainy spells. With the cold showers, temperatures will fall below the 30-degree mark for most regions. For tomorrow, the further south you are, the more rain you'll be receiving. Jeju Island will see severe downpours of up to 200 millimeters. The south coast will see up to 100. Parts of Jeollado and Gyeongsangdo provinces will see 5 to 40 millimeters. For the south coast and Jeju Island, showers will continue until early next week. And for inland regions, dense layers of fog will build up for the morning hours. Visibility is forecast to drop significantly to below 1 kilometer. Drivers are urged to use extra caution out on the roads. Tomorrow, Seoul and Gwangju will be starting off at 21 degrees. Highs in Seoul and Gwangju will be reaching 31, Daegu 29, Gyeongju and Busan will be topping out at 28 degrees. The entire nation will see another round of showers next Tuesday. It's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for this Friday night newscast. Thank you for watching. Hope everyone has a good weekend and a good night.
I'm live!
저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 없지.